I've been podcasting for 3 years now, and I've learned a few lessons about how to grow a podcast. And I've watched a lot of videos about how to start a podcast and what tools to use, and those things are super helpful. But I haven't found many videos about how actually to grow your podcast. That's presumably why you're here, is you want to grow your podcast. You want more listeners to find you, whatever space you're in. I happen to be in the Christians podcast space, but I think this applies to everybody. And so here are 5 ways to grow your podcast in 2025. First, you need to create a content strategy. And what I mean by that is, are you just randomly thinking of episodes? Are you just scratching your head to say, what should we talk about? Hey, I'm guilty of that as well, but I have a framework of development that I think of. This is going to be the best performing episode, and it's 5 steps. These aren't the 5 things, but it's 5 within 5. And first is the most popular episodes are going to be trending topics with trending guests. We all saw at the end of 2024 in the election with Trump and Joe Rogan, the biggest podcast ever. Why? Well, it's the most trending guest with a trending topic leading up to the election, just a couple weeks. Of course, it's going to be the biggest episode ever. Well, in your niche, what is the trending topic and who would the trending guest? If you can combine those 2 things, that's going to be your most popular episode by far. Secondly, you may not be able to get the trending guest, but you can still talk about the trending topic. And so bring on somebody who's a relevant guest that can speak to the topic and speak to what is trending. Now, third, you might not be able to get something that's trending or talk about something that's trending, but you can at least be relevant. The mistake a lot of people then make is they just think if I have a relevant guest, then that's going to have a lot of views. And the truth is, there's podcasts all over the place that have your guests on that they're talking about different things. But if it's not a relevant topic, it's not going to matter. And so the fourth thing is have a relevant topic. What are you talking about? Maybe it doesn't even need to be a relevant guest. It could be one of your friends. It could be somebody that you know has a great story. Bring them on and have them talk about something that's relevant to you. And titles are so important, and we'll get to that in a second. And lastly, if you can't talk about a relevant topic to your audience, then you probably were not meant to be a podcaster and you should just quit. But seriously, come on. Think of topics that are relevant for your audience and do those. That's what people want to hear. Now, I mentioned titles, and the second thing is use AI to help you with your titles and descriptions. For most of us, that's the bane of our existence. We know that titles are so important when it comes to podcasts, but I often will use AI and say, ChatGPT or whatever your favorite AI is, give me 10 title options or title suggestions for an episode talking to this type of person about this type of thing. You can also upload to different tools like Riverside and ChatGPT. You can upload a video and say, watch this video and give me a few title suggestions. We use it all the time. And if I don't like the title suggestions, I'll ask, give me 5 more. Give me 10 more. Give me 10 more that will get better click-through rates with my audience. Give me 3 titles that are more engaging. Give me 7 different options. Write a description for me. Use AI. It's so impactful. It's so incredible. It saves so much time. I'm not a professional copywriter, but I can just go in, edit a little bit, and upload it. And a bonus tip, you can also use AI to do chapters in your videos. Sometimes you're scrubbing through and you're trying to figure out chapters for YouTube. Upload it to an AI platform and say, give me chapters for YouTube on this video. And boom, within a few seconds, it's going to spit out chapters almost perfectly. And maybe you have to make a few edits here and there, but it's going to save you at least 10, 20 minutes, maybe even hours. The third one might seem counterintuitive to you, but hear me out. I think you should spend more time on your social clips and not less. There's great tools out there like Opus Clips, and we use those, but a lot of times they talk about be more efficient, get as many clips as possible, and that can work for some people. But I've found that on social media, so many people are using these AI tools that it's lost its personal touch. For me, when I'm talking about a changed life or a testimony or a story of inspiration, if I just let AI do it, it might try to make controversy or it might try to do something with trending words, but it's actually not going to tell the full story. I've taken more time to devote to social, and it's worked for us. Just in 2024, on Instagram alone, we've reached over 16 million people on social media just on our Instagram clips. That doesn't include TikTok. That doesn't include YouTube. We found that when we take the time, when we're intentional about our social media clips, it can reach a huge audience. And then, of course, that's going to bring people to your long form episodes and have them follow you and subscribe to your channel. A lot of us know that every video needs a hook. And we all are thinking about the hook. What is the first few seconds of my video? And I totally agree that that's important. But some of us stop there. If I have a good hook, the rest of the clip doesn't need to be as intentional. And I think nothing could be further from the truth. Just because you have a good hook doesn't mean that people are going to watch your whole video. And so the three things I'm thinking about when cutting social clips are this. First, does it have a good hook? Secondly, what am I doing to create retention? Is there anything in this video that's causing me to lull, that's causing me to drift away? Have you showed it to friends? Some people stop there. They have a great hook. It's very clickbait or it's going to get attention, but it might not get retention. People might not watch the whole thing. They might see it and you might get comments or you might get people to engage, but it might not be the audience you're trying to engage. Think about the story you're trying to tell. Think about your Instagram, your TikTok, your YouTube shorts like their own individual audience. Most of these people have no context of your podcast. They've never heard it before. They've never listened to an episode. Let the clips on their own be a story. I almost think about the 60 seconds or 90 seconds or 30 seconds as their own little mini episode. What do I want people to feel when they're watching this clip? How do I want them to react? On Instagram, I want them to share this clip. On YouTube, I want them to like this video and subscribe to my channel. How do I want them to feel? How do I want them to respond? Those are questions that need a human touch. And maybe AI gets better and maybe that these clips blow us out of the water. I think we need to spend more time on social clips, really thinking about our audience so that we can reach them where they're at and we're gonna get the response that we're looking for. Number 4, we're almost done. Try longer episodes. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wait, why do I want to be longer in a world where attention is so short and there's so many other things? I listen to podcast episodes that are 2-3 hours long. Some of the biggest podcasts in the world are super, super long. So you say, okay, but can I do that? I'd encourage you to try longer episodes. One, because you have more content to choose from for social clips. If you're going to grow your content on social media and you have a longer episode, just naturally, you have more things to choose from. Also, it engages with your audience more. It allows you to be more authentic. We all know that it's hard being a podcast host, but when you have to do an hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours, you have to prep more. You've got to think about the questions you're going to ask. You've got to think about the rabbit trails. You've got to hone it in. You've got to expand. You've got to ask the question behind the question. And so think about longer episodes to help grow your podcast because it shows more of who you are, but it helps make you better. It might be more work, but more work is sometimes better because it makes you better and it might make your podcast grow. Lastly, I'd encourage you to ask bigger and more popular guests. I know for me, I'm afraid to ask people and say, I don't know if they'll say yes. I'm afraid what if I reach out to them and their management team says no way? What's the worst that can happen? That they say no? I've been turned down so many times from people that I want to have on my podcast, but I've been surprised that others have said yes and they've joined me and they've been some of the most popular episodes. You say, well, how do I reach out to somebody that I don't know? First, speak it into existence. There have been so many people that I've had on the podcast that I didn't know before that I told a friend and I said, I'd love to have that on the podcast. You'd be surprised that other people's networks are different than your networks. I said to a friend, I said, I'd love to have this person on the podcast. He said, no way. I actually know that guy. Let me reach out to him. Another time, I told another friend that I'd love to have this pastor on a podcast. 2 weeks later, I was at a conference in a different state. He sat down right in front of me. A few months later, we had him on the podcast. Another person that I've always dreamed of having the podcast that we haven't had yet, and I'm thinking I would love to have her on. I was talking with some friends who I was doing a podcast with and said, yeah, I'd love to have her on the podcast. They said, no way, she's a part of our church. We'd love to get you connected. Speak it into existence. Don't be afraid to ask people. Don't be afraid to speak it into existence just because you're afraid to fail. Some of these big guests can open big doors because their audience is going to be looking for stuff from them. They're going to find your podcast and they might like what you're doing as well. Also, sometimes they might surprise you. And it's like the story with prom. Oh, the prettiest girl didn't get asked. And then she goes with this ugly guy. You say, how did the ugly guy get to take the pretty girl to prom? Well, nobody asked and she didn't want to not go to prom. So, hey, you might be ugly, but you might get somebody on the podcast just from asking. And lastly, make it personal. If you've listened to a podcast with them and you heard about something that they love, maybe they're really into hunting or they love visiting new places or they're into photography or they have something that they collect, maybe you send that to them and you write them a handwritten note and say, you've inspired me and I've loved hearing your work and I would be honored if you'd be on the podcast with me. It's a little bit more work, but it goes a long way. Also, sometimes they might surprise you and just say yes. You send them an email and they say yes. And you say, are you serious? You saying yes to me? They want to get their message out there. Maybe they just launched a book. Maybe they launched a new podcast. Maybe they're in a slow season and they just want to talk and help out. Share how much they've impacted you and how honored you'd be. And I think a lot of people say, well, we can talk about anything you want to talk about. Don't put that on the guest that you're asking. Come with a plan and say, I would love to ask you about how you've done this, how you've changed the world through the things that you do, or this has impacted me specifically, and I wanted to ask you more questions that I think would be related to my audience. And be honest about your audience size. You don't have to fake it till you make it. You don't have to pretend that you're bigger than you are. I think people are more genuine and they understand the podcast world. We've seen it change in 2024. It's only getting bigger in 2025. And I hope this has been helpful in 5 ways for you to grow your podcast.